Live. Today, I am really happy to bring to you our guests, Elisabetta and Emilio from the Foradori Winery in Trentino, Italy. Thank you so much for joining us. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Greetings for the Dolomites.
Oh, totally. I mean, this is actually really exciting for me. It's to give the audience an idea of why it's so exciting to me, not just because you are an icon of Italian wine, but because for me, I've actually started my education in northern Italy with the wines of Foradori. And it wasn't even the big international winning Granato. It was actually the Terroir from your family and a vertical tasting. This is over 10 years ago that proved to me that Terroir was a worthy variety to be interested in, to be seeking out and collecting, and that you of all people were the one that really put it on the map outside of Italy. So thank you so much. I can't tell you how great it is to have you guys both here. I'm thinking, the first thing we should probably do though is to give everybody an idea of where you're located and a bit of the surroundings of the region, and talk a little bit about Trentino and basically environs of Trentino first. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
So actually we are in the middle of the Dolomites. So we are very up in the north of Italy. We are 100 kilometers, like 2 hours drive from Austria, and we are 1 hour from Verona, 2 hours from Venezia. Our area actually is more known for skiing. We're surrounded by mountains. We have very steep walls just close to the wineries. And if I take the car, in 20 minutes, I'm on a ski slope. So this is a very alpine mountain area where we are. And beside that, there is also a little bit of vineyards. So Trentino is a very small region, mainly known for whites. We have like 8,000 hectares. Just to give you an idea, Italy has 600,000 hectares. So we are one of the smallest cool climate wine regions in Italy.
And so what I'm seeing here, when we look at these maps you sent us, your winery is essentially located at this joining of three different rivers, or two different rivers and three different valleys here, which is a big part of what creates the unique terroir that you're able to take advantage of there. Is that correct?
Yes, in fact, there are huge difference between the bigger river, which is Adige, and the Noce, which is our river, in fact, which during the centuries, the Noce made the soil of the Campo Rotaliano, which is the Tirol area. So we have a lot of different stones coming together, mainly dolomite, but also porphyr, granite, and it's a mix of sandy soil and rocks. So that makes big difference on the character of the wine if you have vineyard on pure sandy soil or on the stone. And of course, the mountain is very important. They surround the vineyard and they keep also the climate a little bit different from the big, huge Adige Valley. This is a huge character for the Campo Rotaliano, yes. Important for the Tirol.
So yes. These are the soils that you're talking about. So this is more of like an alluvial deposit from a riverbed versus the soils when you move farther north, which are more like glacial deposits, correct?
It's correct, yes. It's an alluvial soil, yes. As you see, the white stone are more dolomite, and then you have granite, porphyr. So, the diversity makes things always better. So as far as we have diversity of soils, diversity even in the genetic. Of course, Tirol is one variety, but we worked a long time on the biodiversity of the varieties, making massal selection. I'm working a long time on the seeds of Tirol. So improve all that makes our grape more alive and with a lot of character. There is no clone, no boring monoculture.
These are pretty stunning photos that you guys sent over to us, and I just want everyone to see just how amazing this region really is. We see pictures of the mountains surrounding parts of Trentino and such. But I mean, you are literally at the foot of the Dolomites here, correct? I mean, it's beautiful. That's absolutely beautiful. So from this picture, is your winery actually in this picture here? Can you give us an idea of where it is there?
Yes, actually, you see that little spot surrounded by houses. Like, you know what, in Europe, there is a very popular comic called Asterix and Obelix. They're defending them from the Romans. There are two galleons, and we're like surrounded by houses. So this is where we are like the last vineyard in the little town of Mezzalombardo. And then on the left and on the right, where you don't see the houses, we have different parcels, totally 18, with different types of soils. So sometimes it's more sandy, sometimes we have more pebbles, and these are the parcels of Teroldego in the Campo Italiano.
And what kind of elevation are you at?
We are 228 meters.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that in feet, but it's like
no, that's fine.
It's not so high. So the peak of the mountains you see there with the snow at the left, it's like 1,800 meters just to give an idea. And the mountains just behind this photo goes up to 3,000 meters. So we are kind of in a valley.
And is there a vast difference? Forgive my geeky questions. I wanted to get out of the way. I'm always into the whole thing, the terroir and the soils and such. Is there a large difference between the deposits left by the Noce River versus the Adige?
Yeah, there's a huge difference. In fact, at the left of the photo, you go into the Piana Rotagliana and the Val di Non, where the Noce brought the stony material, because at the end of this valley, there's one of the biggest glacier of the Southern Alps, the Adamello-Presanella glacier, and all the deposits were coming from there, while the Adige Valley had a much deeper soil. So we have a richer soil, mainly limo, and so the difference between the Piana Rotagliana, so the vineyards on the left, and the rest of the valley is quite big. So there are few spots in this valley where you find, let's say, pebbles and stony material.
And are you also, so, you know, we hear that Trento and also Bolzano are actually quite warm due to their locations, the elevation in the valleys and such. Do you have a similar situation there? Do you actually have a warmer climate than people would expect in such an alpine region?
So it depends. I would say in Mezzalombardo, especially in Piana Rotagliana, we can have very high temperatures, but at the same time, we have a very cold wind coming from the Val di Non and the glaciers up there. So I live just 20 minutes in the Adige Valley. When I start and come to work, there is always a 2 degrees difference between where I live in the Adige Valley and the Piana Rotagliana. So it's colder in the morning, much colder, and it's heating up a lot during the day. So it's kind of fresher than the climate, for example, in Bolzano.
Okay, absolutely. So Lagrein and Teroldego have some genetic similarities, correct?
Yeah, we would say yes.
So the genetics is quite interesting because Teroldego is in the big Pinot family, and Teroldego always stayed in the Piana Rotagliana but had a lot of children. So one of the children, so there's a direct relationship between Lagrein and Teroldego. There's a direct relationship between Lagrein and Schiava, between Teroldego and Schiava, between Teroldego and Marzemino, and there is a wider relationship between Teroldego and Syrah, which is very interesting. So it's a variety which had, let's say, a lot of sexual activity in the past and had a lot of children around, and one of them is Lagrein.
No, very cool, very cool. No, these are all the things that you know, I'm always thinking about as we're digging into these and trying to understand what's in the glass and such. You know, it's amazing. You talk about the parentage and the different grapes that are connected here, and I think about just how formidable a glass of Teroldego can be, and what you're saying just makes so much sense. So I'm wondering if maybe we can kind of like, let's back up for a minute. We definitely covered some of the terroir in general and the region, which I think is great. Really paints a great picture to everybody about where you guys are and what's surrounding you. I'd like to know a little bit about the history of your winery, because it's an extremely interesting history. Obviously it goes farther back than Elisabetta coming on board, and you had breathed so much life into what has been accomplished there. But maybe you could tell me a little bit about the beginnings, about how Foradori started, and how we have moved to where we are today.
Yeah, in fact, it's going back to my grandfather. We bought the winery in the 30s, and he was a gentleman who, yes, the wine business was still there, but it was a lot of cow, animal, fruit, and it was really a farm based on wine, but also extending in a lot of other activity. And basically, my father in the late 50s went into specializing agriculture, so into the wine. He passed away very soon in 76. So my mother, Gabriela, she's a strong woman and keep everything together, even in difficult time. As far as I finished the school and I started, I was 19, about to work on the wine. At that time, it was 84. Yes, Terroir was completely unknown. It was just a local wine. Also famous in the books in the past as a very good variety, long aging. It was a glorious time in the during the Austrian domination, but then everything stayed locally. So it was very difficult at the time of, it was like the international variety was this super Tuscan, or this idea that local variety, Italian local variety, were not able to give good wine. It was just there, land of the 80s. So for me, it was quite difficult to go outside and speak about local variety, red wine from the Alps. And but then slowly things went better, with the help of Emilio's father, Rainer. We made together the Granato in 86. And in a couple of years, Terroir became, through the Granato, in fact, international, quite well-known reputation. This was very important, just to keep alive the winery. It was really hard to stay there and find a solution, in this world of crazy, super international style wine. Yeah.
Right. So at the time you were only like early 20s?
Yeah, I was.
Did you have any training and background in winemaking at the time, or was this all just through your family and growing up in the vines?
No, I went to the school, viticulture school, and then in the winter, and I made a lot of trip, mostly to France, just to understand. Because stay under the mountain of Trentino was not opening my view in the world. So it was very important, the relationship with a lot of vignerons, a lot of different mentality. And slowly, yes, things became clearer, and I was very, very free to do everything, because I was alone with two people helping me. And yes, it was everything open in the good way or bad way. So it was a time of a lot of experiment, a lot of idea, and but the clear view was from the beginning, keep alive this variety in the purity and try to find out the pure expression, which is not only the variety but the diversity, the genetic. So we work a lot on, you say, master selection, seed selection. So now I can say that the Terroir Vignò Foradori are like a beautiful garden of hundreds of different Terroir inside.
Well, I mean, it's interesting because, I mentioned pioneer, trailblazers, icons. I know it's hard to hear these things very often. You're a humble person and such, but it's a reality. The creation of Granato really did so much for Terroir and for the region, and put it on the map. And although that may not be the style of wine you push toward, at least the original Granato. May not be the style of wine you push for today, but this has been a constant evolution since the beginning. And at the time, it was what was needed to bring the attention to the variety and the region. Where did the idea for Granato come from?
Oh, in fact, it's something which came for love, because Rainer, also my husband, he came and on my birthday and bringing 21 barrel of, at the time was the fantastic Tonnelier François Frère, fantastic quality of the oak. And we decided to select 3 very old pergola, so 100 and more years old wine, and to make this wine into this barrel. It was like, yes, that's Granato was born like this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a love story, in fact.
That's beautiful. But through this entire time so what are you sipping right now, Emilio? I think I know what it is, but I just wanted to see.
You're sipping right now the Foradori 2018.
I have the same wine here. Gorgeous. So the question is, was this wine being made throughout that entire time?
Yes, it was called Terroir de Goro-Italiano. At the time we were into the DOC.
Mm-hmm.
And, but you know, in the 80s we make very, very fine wine. So like liter wine, like a rosé, and I went into the trattoria sending the wine. But something similar like Foradori was, yes, the best 1 or 2 cask select, and it was our, yes, best wine. Then came Granato slowly. Yeah.
Well, Granato is absolutely amazing. I mean, tremendous aging potential and such. But even that tasting that I had mentioned earlier in this conversation was actually not the Granato. It was actually the Terroir de Go. And we're talking about a vertical that went back. I mean, this person who hosted this tasting had been collecting your wines. I believe they came from your region. They had been tasting your wines for decades, and they had them going back easily 20 years. It was so eye-opening. So I'm wondering though, because, okay, so things really started to change. So you started to do a lot more experimentation in the late 90s, going to the early 2000s. You know, prior to that, you know, you had started using mast cell selection, but it was at that point that you started looking at more of a holistic approach, more toward organics and biodynamics. Am I correct? What inspired that?
That was a personal disease which inspired that, because at that time, the late end 90s, yes, Foradori was quite famous. Everything ran well, but it was like such a, I mean, the feeling was I'm not connected with what I'm doing. So, and even the meeting of Mark Reidenwald, which is vigneron in Alsace, which was working on biodynamic a long time, inspired me a lot to find, it was just to turn on a method which was give me the possibility to find myself through my work, which was not obviously, because I went to a viticulture school and it was a lot of technology there. So it was, for me, difficult to change. But now I will say that point in the late 90s, the most important point of my life, because, except my family, of course, because it's connecting me to the true roots and the aim of the agriculture. It's not regarding, of course, it's regarding viticulture, but now I'm really, this is the true and very important way to understand nature and agriculture. Yeah.
Well, you know, I definitely want to get into a little more detail of the wines, but since we're on this topic of that time period and such, you know, the 2 Amphora reds that you produce right now, I had read at some point that you actually had produced these wines prior, up to 99, but I'm assuming a completely different approach to winemaking. Is that correct?
Yes, at the time, at the beginning of the 90s, it was clear that the 2 different soil, which Garzone and Morey are. Garzone is sandy soil, Morey is stony soil. It was like very expressive of the difference of Terroir. so I started to make these two single vineyard in the cask, but
Mhm.
it was too early. So at the time to understand Granato, two different Terroir that goes and. So after many years, I decided to stop. But then when we discovered the clay and the fantastic efforts of the clay, we decided in 2009 to go back to the single vineyard. This is a little bit the history. It was like a stop from 10 years. Yeah.
So I'm wondering, when you mentioned one inspiration to you, I mean, what are the wines that inspire you? What are the wineries that inspire you? What are you drinking when you can choose something that is not a Foradori wine?
At the moment, I would like always to drink old white wine. That's mean mostly the Italian variety, white variety, which they was a little bit not understand in the past because of the technology. You know that the mostly of our variety are neutral and not very aromatic, except the Moscato or some really rare other variety. So through the natural winemaking, which means mostly lets the variety express in the purity and the fermentation on the skin, we are now able to drink such a beauty of the Italian white expression. So yes, mostly that. So
Italian white wine.
variety from France, which are 5 to 10 years old. Yes, this is what I love now. Mm-hmm.
Well, that's really interesting because it's something that here in the American market you don't, people hear about these white varieties that can mature well, but here in the United States, it's very much, white Burgundy is something you put in your cellar. Other than that, there's not a lot of white wines that are being aged in American cellars. But it is interesting what's going on these days with Trebbiano Abruzzese and these varieties that are showing this ability to mature for decades. It's absolutely amazing.
Even a Trebbiano Toscano or a good Grillo or Insolia, or you go back to the Vernaccia, or it's fantastic what is coming. A Garganega, more and more. Of course, Nosiola, which I love, but it's a great potential of aging. A beauty you cannot imagine what is coming out in the evolution.
That is actually a really good point, because that's another variety from your region, if I'm not mistaken, a native variety of your region, correct? That is not enough of it is making it into the United States at this time, but it's certainly very exciting. So Emilio, I'm interested in hearing about when you came on board before your brother and your sister, correct? And what was the winery like at that point? And what kind of led up to you coming on board and taking over the winemaking process?
Well, first, after my high school, I didn't have the clear view my mom had when she took over the winery. So I wanted to study philosophy and politics. So basically, I wanted to start an academic career in Germany.
Mm-hmm.
And, after the first year, I saw that was not my field. I finished my bachelor, but then I straight started to work in some wineries in Germany, in France, at Rebholz, Montalcino. And finally, after 3-4 years traveling around, working around, I came here in the winter 2012. And the first year I just did stuff in the vineyard. So starting from pruning, doing then the whole labor work and trying to understand what's going on. Because for me, I was also away for these 4 years and I saw the winery changing and this deep changement also of my mom. I mean, I went to Catholic school and my little brother went to Waldorf school. So, there was a big changement in the life of my mom. And I saw this when I was not there. Mm. And so the first thing I try to do is to understand what's going on, because I worked also in very conventional wineries like Chateau Cheval Blanc, and then I made also a degree at Montpellier. And I was also more on the technical side at the beginning. Mm-hmm. And what I did for the first 2 years was observing. And I find my way into biodynamics, which at the beginning, especially coming from a theoretic study, I was not so convinced to. I found the way into it with the empiric side of biodynamics. So with working in the vineyards, observing and seeing how these methods can change the life and can change the whole organism of the vineyard in a quite short time, frankly. And I found a winery also in a big changement, still there, because my mom was in a big changement. And the first year I just tried to observe. So I have also to say the first vintages. So my first vintage was officially 2013.
Mm-hmm.
And also 14, I respected the most was there, and I made kind of copy and paste. Try to do what mom is doing and don't mess it up too much. With a lot of help with her. And it's say with the vintage 15 and especially with the vintages then 18, there was a changement. Making wine is something very personal, and I was very lucky that my mom gave me the key in the hand. Of course, we share a lot of things also with my brother and my sister. And little by little, I started to get in my influences and experiences, trying to bring freshness and complexity in a glass.
Well, you know, it's interesting you mentioned that because I actually do remember tasting across a table with the two of you. It was a large tasting, but I remember, Elisabetta, how proud you were of the wines that Emilio was starting to produce. And I remember you came around the table and started talking to me about them. And it was this level of pride that I could feel coming from you. That was just amazing. So obviously your mom, she knew you were doing the right thing, and she was absolutely right there with you. You mentioned philosophy. I had noticed on the back of your bottles, are those quotes from your father that you have on the back labels of your bottles?
Exactly.
And was that something that you got from him? Was he very much into philosophy and such?
Well, my father actually had a technical background. He was a genetist of vines, but he had always this holistic approach. So for him, making wine, farming a piece of land was not only to make a profit out of it or understand the physiology of the plant. It was something bigger. So it was always something embedded in a big picture of nature. Mm-hmm. And he had a very wide view of everything. He had a lot of quotes. He was drawing also, making cheese also. He was kind of, he had a very wide approach to things, and he wrote also a lot of things. We're also republishing his book. And so each label has his own quote. And yes, on every bottle you find a different one.
That's amazing. The love that comes from this family is just it's amazing. So okay, so we've talked about older vintages of Granato and the Terroir and such, and I'm wondering, do you maintain a good sized library of your back vintages? I noticed in some of the pictures you sent me there appeared to be a good amount of wines. I'm not sure if those are just resting in bottle or if you guys actually keep a large library.
Yes, we keep the whole library for the family, but constantly Granato is put on the back, and also the new, Moreis, Garzon, the Fontana Santa Nosiola. We made a progressive reserve of Magnum, and now more and more we have a good place for storing the wine, and we are finding more. It's so important to show how this wine can age, and we understand that it's so important that we have to try to do this way, because it's so important that wine age in a proper environment, quiet and stable. And then yes, we are keeping all our best wine in a larger amount to put on the side. Yeah.
Now, how far back does
we will release some old vintage soon?
Oh, you're going to be doing some late release of older vintages?
In January, yes. January, February, we make a first release for a lot of our wine. Yeah.
Any hint on the vintages, or?
No, it's not very, very old vintages, but starting from 2012. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Oh, still, that's enough to show people just how well Terroir can mature, and especially in a cold cellar. How far back does your library go? Not necessarily in quantity, but I mean, like, how far back do you have bottles that you could taste?
The wine of my father, we have bottles from 66, 59.
Amazing.
Yeah, even from white wine, we have some 59. At the time that he produced also the Roots Traminer, which is quite impressive. It's really, even the whites, as I told you, they're aging very, very well. Yeah.
What do you feel is like, for instance, I remember at one point reading that you were a fan of Nebbiolo, the wines of Piedmont. I think of those as no less than 10 and most normally 20-year wines for me personally. For you with Terroir de Go, what do you feel like the aging curve is for Terroir de Go? When should people be thinking to start drinking the average vintage of Granato?
Truly say at least after 10 years will the best point to start to drink everything, even the Moret and Scarzone. This is last Sunday, 2010 Scarzone. It was amazing, so fresh and so, yeah.
That's amazing, because a lot of people don't actually consider Amphora wines to be wines that they should be putting away and aging.
It's nothing to do with aging in oak cask. Aging is a question of balance, and you have balance in life, the wine age, and of course 8 months skin contact in such a harmony and exchange of information. The wine goes and goes far away.
That's really actually very exciting to hear. I definitely need to start putting some of it away. I think the problem is that it's so good when it's put out there that I mean, of course, Scarzone, it's a wine that you taste it, you feel like it needs more time, but still so enjoyable in its youth. So we talked about the biodynamics, and I'm wondering before we really start, moving more away from the vineyards, though I do want to talk about the vineyards where your white wines are being produced. The wine that I'm actually sipping today is the Manziano Bianco. And I definitely want to talk about this, but I'm wondering before we go there, how has climate change affected you, especially as a biodynamic producer? Has it been any drastic changes in the way that you guys are approaching your vineyards and such?
I think we are very lucky because we have so healthy and alive plants, because of course there are climate change. It's more humid. We have, of course, big difference to compare to the past. But the plants, they are in a balance which permitted a very good maturity, which is going through this harmony. So in fact, every harvest, even if it's too warm or is too wet, has a point of maturity which is excellent. I don't know what you think, Emilio, but for me, this is the most important thing we have in relationship of the climate change with life in the vineyard.
Yeah, I agree on that. And then we have another thing, well, beside of Pinot Grigio, which is a kind of international variety, we have our local varieties, which are doing very well actually with climate change. So Nosiola, for example, it's hard to reach 12 degrees alcohol on a ripe vintage. So it's a variety which was absolutely not adapted maybe in the past, and people used to treat it differently. But today, having a variety with a very low alcohol potential is amazing, because it's getting hotter, it's getting more complicated. Same thing with Terroir de Go. I mean, I guess my mom and my grandmother, they struggle to reach 12 potential alcohol in the 80s. We today, I mean, this vintage so far, it's kind of normal, let's say, climate change vintage. I have maximal alcohol, potential alcohol we are harvesting right now is 13, and 0.3% is going away with fermentation. So we are still very lucky with our local varieties, which are kind of more adapted than much more international varieties with climate change.
That's interesting. So you're actually getting something of a boost from the climate change effects with the local varieties. That is really interesting. So this is a picture of the Fontana Santa vineyard, correct?
Yes.
And so how far away is this from your winery, and how does the terroir change here?
It's about 15 minutes far away. It's behind Trento on the hill, in a very different terroir. It's lime. It's a clay limestone soil. So it's the best soil for Nosiola and Manzoni Bianco. Not really the best soil for Teroldego. In fact, we have a little vineyard there which produces a more rustic and a little bit, I would say, not so elegant Teroldego. But for Nosiola and Manzoni is fantastic. And altitude is around 400 meters. So it's not our property. In fact, we said long-term rent, we can say, for a family, which is fantastic. They have this property. It's very close to the town, but it's really like you go into a different, in a different location. We have the cow there into the vineyard. It's forest, it's vineyard, but it's really, we are very lucky with this place. And biodynamic is running very well there because of the huge diversity of the plants and the animal, of course.
So you mentioned the cows. I had heard that you are starting to work on producing cheese and such. Is this the same location that this is coming from?
Yes, there are 8-hectare vineyard and some forest, and we have 7 cows there. They are free into the vineyard except April and May and until middle June, because of course after this time they go into the mountain. And yes, I started with cheese making about 6 months ago. It's a new experience of fermentation, a lot of similarity with wine, and this is a little startup. So it will take me 10 years to understand and go deeper, but it's huge, interesting, and I'm very lucky. I'm very, very happy with that.
That's actually really exciting. It seems to be something of a trend that's been going on in Italy as winemakers are starting to experiment more into farming, agriculture beyond the vineyards. And it reminds me of Chiara Bastis in Piemonte, who's also starting to look into these kinds of things. It's very, very cool. So let's talk a little bit about Amphora. So what brought that into the mix? At what point did you decide to start maturing Amphora, experimentation? Who inspired you to do this? How did that all come about?
It was 2007 when we started in Fontana Santa with old vineyard of Nosiola, and thinking about the Nosiola in the past. The people used to ferment Nosiola always on the skin, I mean, before the technology came. And I had the opportunity to taste fantastic old Nosiola from that period. So I was trying to find a container for keep Nosiola on the skin for a long time. And in the meantime, Rudolf Steiner, and it was in my mind, he always spoke about clay as an element of balance, of, taking together the opposite side from calcaire and quartz. And in all this thinking around, a big friend of mine, which is Giusto Chipinti from the Coast Winery, came one day and say, Eli, you have to try this fantastic Tinajas. He was at that time working with Tinajas, and he was spending a lot of time to find out the best clay for wine fermentation. So yes, thanks Giusto, I started in fact 2009 is the first vintage with Nosiola, and this is a point of my life when the second point of everything changed in terms of making wine. Everything was, I thought is not possible, was possible into the tinajas, in the clay pot. And then slowly every year added a little bit, and now we work on 250 different container, making Nosiola, Ripista, Pinot Grigio, Morey, and Scarzone.
So wait, do you say 250 different Amphora in your winery? Is that what you just told me?
247 to be exact.
Oh.
Okay.
Oh.
Just to
I have
make
to clean them, so I know very well
He's very
number,
German.
The number.
Very punctual. Yes, absolutely. Very nice. No, that's amazing. I mean, how large of a space are we talking about here to house all of these?
Oh, is it 3 different cellar or 4?
Yeah, let's say, yeah, 3 basically. And yeah, the logistic is quite complicated. And I mean, you have to imagine that each tinaja, each amphora has his own life. So there is in every single container something different is going on. We have, of course, we use no sulfur, no additives, no yeast during fermentation, before bottling, nothing. So you have to kind of take care of each tinaja, because there is a life equilibrium which is different compared to the others. And it's a question of precision, and it's a question of a lot of dedication.
And I can add each container has, of course, his own fermentation. And you have the container of Morey, so you have 20 different Morey, in fact, when you taste. So when we make the blend, is one more step into diversity coming together. So it's a lot of work. The container, so the tinajas are around 450 liter, but it's an amazing experience. Actually, I say always, you have to drink the wine directly from the tinajas, because the bottling is always a big shock, And you imagine the wine staying there with the skin until June, May, or April, and then coming out, going to a bottle. But of course, that's because those wine needs a lot of time, and a lot of time, even when you open the bottle, put in the glass, wait. They are very slow wine, but then they give you a lot of different expression during the 1-2 hours when you drink the bottle. It's fantastic. It's a bomb of life and a bomb of purity.
Absolutely.
It's very important.
I mean, do you have a good feeling for, considering the amount of amphora we're talking about that might go into one vintage of these wines? Do you have a good feeling for what that blend is going to be when it's all put together? I mean, is there a blending process, or are you just taking the amphora you're happy with and blending that into the mix, and then taking that final blend and going with that? You understand what I'm saying?
It's a question of, let's say, sensitivity in this case. There are some years where every tinaja, I mean, making wine in the tinaja with the skins means dealing with life. And all life process go to an end. It's not nice to say, but at the end of the process, wine becomes water, a bit of oxygen, and some carbon. So some tinajas, of course, because there is so much energy inside, they also don't go in a good way. So we have kind of also to take care and make sure that the ones which are going more to volatile acidity, stuff like that, are going out to the blend. So there is one step where you have to take care of this. So it's kind of a negative blending. And of course, then you have to see which are the greatest tinajas. In the years, because the differences are so big, we also decided, and that's a project we just started last year, to select some special ones which are not going into the blend and which are particularly different. It doesn't mean they're like better than the others, but they come out. Right. And then we try to have an equilibrium by the tinajas, and usually we're using up to 80% of the tinajas for the blend of the Garzon and the blend of the Moët. Having said this, we pick all the grapes the same day. The process is the same, meticulous every day, and we try to keep things equal in order to let express the diversity of the vineyards. And saying this, we try to find this equilibrium in the blend between taking out the two edges, I would say.
And the selection you're talking about,
a lot of work, because we taste them, of course, all in 2 or 3 sessions. And I mean, there are 240, and it takes us always some time.
Sure. I'm sure. And then there's the Cylindrica. Is that a selection of amphora that you feel is particularly special?
No, actually, the Cylindrica project is something different too. That's the same wine of the blend, so the final blend, but with an additional aging in clay of additional 12 months, so totally 24 months of blending. The other one is something special, completely new, actually, which we just bottled some things.
That's really interesting. I've only actually seen one vintage of that, and it's something I have to seek out. Absolutely. Do you feel though that they mature longer, or how do you feel like that really affects the wine, that extra time?
There is another step which is going to more one side on deepness, or for the other side is going more up into the cosmos. There is the wine complete change and express a fineness which is really very interesting. So at the beginning it was just a few of cylindrical. Now our project is to improve this part, because for us is really another step. And truly say the experimentation of on the tinajas is so big. There are a lot of players which we can put on the table, which will no end. Also this particularly good one or different one, what we try to really put it into a project which shows this diversity. Mm-hmm. This is very important. A lot of details, in fact.
Absolutely.
A lot of fun, yeah.
I'm sure it's got to be a lot of fun. It's certainly fun tasting them, I can tell you that. So I actually have a question here from one of our viewers, and they're asking, Elisabetta, how are you still involved in the winery? Are you at all involved in the vineyards or the viticulture or in the winery itself at this time, or are the kids running pretty much everything?
Oh yes, we are a family which work together. So I am, how can I say, I am involved in the manage of the family and manage of the winery with the family. Mm-hmm. So we make project together, and this is part of vision, and also put things running. There's a new project. We have a lot of new things running with horticulture, cheese, the new project on the Montebaldo. So I am quite active in this part. Starting a local development of the market in another way. And of course, I'm behind the biodynamic, so go deeper in the biodynamic aspect, mostly of course outside, and the big project of the seeds, so the vine, the diversity of the genetic through the seeds. This is a project which I started 20 years ago, and now is bringing a lot of good result. And yes, so I am in the vineyard for this project mostly. Of course, I'm behind Emilio 10 meters where they need me. Yeah.
So I've also heard that with going back to the wines, the Granato, that you have actually changed some of the processes in the winery from the wine that people originally came to know from 20 years ago. Can you talk a little bit about that?
This is Emilio.
So yes, it's a long story, but you also started to change it. But yes, let's say with the vintage 15, there is a stronger changement, I would say. What I try to do is to respect fruit in the whole version. It means we work a lot with whole bunches, so we make a lot of hamburgers and cakes, I say. So we work always with whole berries and whole bunches, and we make kind of a layered fermentation. That was a big, let's say, difference in the winemaking, which gave the Granato, in my opinion, more elegance and deepness. Of course, there are, let's say, a little bit less, let's say, muscles. It became an eleganter wine. But I think these changements are going into the deepness and giving a new vision of the Granato. The interesting thing is, behind all that, the vineyards are still the three same vineyards. So if you really taste them parallelly all, you can really feel that the tannin and the structure behind this wine is still the same.
Right.
It's let's say that the recipe, let's say that the ingredients are the same. There is a different same way of cooking. I would say that in these words.
Different chef.
Well, it's definitely it's gorgeous and amazing, the intensity. So I'm thinking this is coming mainly from the vine age at this point. Like, what is the average vine age going into Granato?
So the average vine age, so the plantings are, vines were planted between the end of the 30s and the end of the 50s. So it's around, 70 something.
Mm-hmm. And now from the perspective of how you're treating the winery with, say, like with élevage, oak and such, has that changed drastically?
That changed also drastically, but that's also something which my mom changed, I think, in the mid 2000s. So
okay.
She went already away from small oak, from barrique to bigger barrels. And I'm a big fan of Botti, so I keep that. So the aging of the Granato is still in wood, but it's like 20 hectoliters, so 2,000 liters to 4,000 liters.
All right. No, I just really wanted to bring that up because that's one of the things there's a certain kind of collector here in the States these days where if they feel like the wine is spending time in small oak, they move away from it. And with Granato, that's one of those wines that I spent a large amount of my time when I was in retail trying to explain to people that this is no longer the wine they think it is. And it's amazing to think that it goes that far back that you started to really change what this wine is. And people get that intensity, they get that big muscular wine and they make assumptions. And these assumptions are incorrect. It's the fruit. It's the winemaking is a lot more hands off than they realize these days, and that's a beautiful thing. So certainly something people should be looking into. So I'm wondering because one of the things that that was really interesting to me when I started really looking at your region is we have the different terroir from soil, the different terroir from the different valleys and such. But I was wondering about like vintages. When I start talking to producers about vintages in your region, I get so many different answers from people. And I'm wondering, what you feel specifically for your area. Like can you give me a little bit of details about the last few vintages and, what you think people should be looking out for, ones you think might be mature longer, ones they should be looking at drinking sooner, that kind of thing?
Well, what can we say? I think if you are a good wine grower, of course, the weather is a big player, but if your vineyards are in balance, you can also reach a good maturity. And then there are vintage, of course, with more expression or less expression. I will say I love a lot 2016 as a very classical and balanced harvest, as far as also 19. The wine are amazing in the moment. Going back, perhaps I would say 10 and 13 in my remember are also fantastic vintage. What do you think, Emilio? Almost.
Yeah, it depends what you search. So definitely for aging, for finesse, and ripeness, these vintages my mom told are for sure the best. If you want something, let's say, more approachable, for example, the 18 we are drinking right now, it's quite early vintage with quite good maturity, so wines which are opening up very easily, for example.
And I've heard quite a few people talking very positive about the 19s. I'm very excited to taste your reds from 19.
Yeah, 19 is a fantastic vintage because it's a very late vintage, so we harvested the greatest part of the Terroir in October. So have that maturity of tannins, the coolness at the same time. So we have all elements together for a wine which is complex and can age very well. Yeah, we're also very happy about that, especially about Nosiola, I have to say.
So you had talked about some new projects. Would you say something on Montebaldo? You had said there was a new project. Is that a wine-related project?
In fact, it's a huge project which is the ideal, so idea of a farm which can have in a small area everything. So we have some little old vineyards. We will take the old variety for replanted, some small parcel. We have the garden for Myrta with the vegetable in an altitude of 600 meters. And we have the field for the cow and for planting also some grain. So Montebaldo is close to the Garda Lake. It's about 30 minutes, 35-minute drive from here. And because Mezzo Lombardo, as you see, the Campo Rotagliano is a very limited area, we will start to do this new project we started already to develop this project because of the children, because a new perspective to make also make a life idea of agriculture, which go really to the holistic and, a cycle which is closed up. As Steiner say, the agriculture, the biodynamic agriculture has to be connected with all the different view of the agriculture. So we learn a lot from, what Mirta is doing with the garden, with the vegetable, with the cow, with the sheep. Everything inspires us also for making better wine, because you have different point of view and different sensibility to what is really agriculture. And we are very lucky in that. I'm very happy to be able to move forward on this way. Yeah.
That sounds really exciting. Emilio, I realized that I asked your mother about what her inspirations were, but you're making the wine these days. And so I'm wondering, what other wineries inspire you?
Well, actually, there are two wineries which inspired me a lot. One is in Montalcino, and it's called Pian dell'Orino.
Okay, you know them very well.
To work with the crazy Jan in the harvest. Actually, it was 2000. Yeah, just before coming here, 2012.
Mm-hmm.
That was an amazing experience, going into details which are not imaginable, like trying out a tank with a towel or something like that. So Jan is a fantastic winemaking. And the other one, very important experience, which influenced quite a lot my winemaking style, is Bodega Chacra. So Patagonia, Rio Negro, I was there. And I was flashed by how you can make, because it's a hot region, and work with a delicate variety such as Pinot Noir in the middle of the desert.
Oh yeah, no, I'm sure that they're also glad to hear that they're a huge inspiration to you. I know those wines very well, and it's an area people don't look at enough when it comes especially to Pinot Noir just yet.
And these are like the two working experience. Which influenced me mostly. And wine-wise, I like to drink actually, and you feel it as a little style of the wines, quite cool climate, fresh red wines.
Mm-hmm.
Now I'm like on a Spanish Atlantic Bierzo trip.
Absolutely.
I'm really on that right now, but then I'm quite eclectic, so I'm quite open to lots of things.
A lot of exciting things going on in Spain, that's for sure. And I can totally see the resemblance between some of the efforts of what's going on there and what you guys have set out to do. I got to tell you, I'm really, really thankful that the two of you joined us here today. This has been extremely informative for me, and I'm sure for everyone else as well that was viewing. I was honored to have Elisabetta here today. I wasn't sure if she was gonna sign on. I'm just so happy that you did, because I'm sure I'm speaking for everyone when we all say it's great to talk with you and to hear these things directly from you. And Emilio, I can say that it's great to see that Foradori is in such wonderful hands when it comes to the future, and that's great to hear. And I love Coraggio. Great courage to do what you need to do to make a
all the farmer in the world. Coraggio.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Thank you so much, both of you. Everyone, thank you for joining us. Elisabetta, Emilio, thank you for joining us. Ciao.